It started with a scream over the radio, a mother yelling that a teenage girl was threatening to hurt the neighborhood kids. Calls like that are never simple. I've been an officer for over a decade, and I've learned that the line between trouble and tragedy can be thinner than a whisper. My name is Officer Mark Dawson, and on that April afternoon the air felt heavy, like something dangerous was waiting just around the corner. The dispatcher's voice crackled with urgency as she gave me the address. A quiet street lined with small houses and tired lawns, the kind of place where people still wave at each other in the mornings. But that day, no one was waving. When I pulled up, I saw worried parents on their porches and children huddled near their mothers. Their eyes followed me, full of questions I wasn't sure I could answer. A teenage girl named Nicole lived nearby, just 16, but already known to us. Reports said she had been chasing kids, shouting threats, claiming no one could touch her because she was still a minor. I stepped out of the patrol car and the stillness of the neighborhood pressed against me. It was that kind of quiet that feels wrong, the kind that hides fear beneath it. As I adjusted my vest and walked toward the house, I could feel the old familiar tension creeping up my spine, the sense that whatever was waiting inside that door would stay with me long after my shift ended. When I stepped out of the patrol car, the afternoon sun glared off the pavement, and the air carried that thick tension I've learned to recognize, the kind that tells you people have been afraid for a while. A woman named Lisa Cooper stood near her front porch, her arms crossed tightly, her voice trembling, as she told me a teenage girl had threatened her kids again. The girl's name was Nicole Harris, 16 years old, known in the area for shouting at neighbors and wandering the block late at night. Lisa said her son came running in crying, saying Nicole told him she was going to stab him. I took a slow breath and asked where the girl lived. Lisa pointed down the street, her hand shaking slightly. As she spoke, her tone shifted from anger to fear. I could see in her eyes that this wasn't just about words. It was about the dread of what could come next. I walked toward Nicole's house, my boots crunching over gravel, my hand brushing the edge of my radio out of habit. Her place was small, the paint peeling off the walls, curtains drawn tight even though it was still daylight. A woman stepped out from the porch, her mother Jamie Harris, looking worn down, tired beyond her years. She said Nicole had been having a rough time, that she'd been in and out of counseling, that she didn't mean harm. I asked if Nicole was inside. Jamie hesitated before nodding. I could feel something heavy behind her eyes, that look of a parent who's been through this too many times. When I asked her if Nicole had ever hurt anyone before, she looked away and whispered that a few weeks back, Nicole had stabbed her younger brother during an argument. My pulse quickened. I kept my tone calm, but inside I knew this was serious. I asked if Nicole had any weapons today. Jamie shook her head, saying no, but her voice wavered and I could tell she wasn't sure. I approached the door carefully and knocked. The air inside the house was still thick with the faint smell of cleaning spray and something metallic. From the back room came a voice, sharp, restless, defiant. Nicole stepped out, eyes wide and glassy, talking fast, switching between anger and laughter in seconds. She said she didn't touch anyone, that everyone was lying about her, that people just wanted her gone. I listened, watching her hands, her movements, the way her eyes darted from one corner to another. There's a rhythm to danger. You learn to hear it in the pauses between words, in the way silence stretches too long. Nicole's voice cracked when I asked if she had a knife. She said she didn't, but the tremor in her voice told me otherwise. I glanced at Jamie, who stood frozen near the hallway, tears forming in her eyes. I radioed in for backup, keeping my tone even. Nicole's shoulders tensed as she caught the static from my radio. She muttered something I couldn't catch, then turned her head sharply toward me. In that instant, I felt the shift, the calm before the storm breaking, the kind of moment that decides whether the next few seconds will end with words or with cuffs. The first thing I noticed as I approached the house was the sound, a strange rhythm between laughter and shouting, the kind that makes your pulse quicken. I knocked on the door, and before I could even finish, Nicole stormed into the living room, her energy, erratic words spilling faster than thought. She was small but intense, pacing back and forth like she was trying to outrun her own thoughts. I spoke calmly, keeping my tone firm but low, asking her to sit down and talk to me. She ignored the command, her eyes sharp and restless. Her mother stood behind her, arms crossed, fear and exhaustion written all over her face. Nicole kept saying she didn't do anything, that everyone in the neighborhood was lying about her, that people hated her for no reason. I asked her if she had threatened any of the children. She said no, but her eyes shifted toward the floor, that small tell I've seen too many times. I asked if she had a knife. She laughed, a sound that didn't match her words, and said she didn't need one to make people listen. That was enough for me to know she needed to be detained before things escalated. I asked Jamie to step aside, then told Nicole I needed her to come with me. The second the words left my mouth, she froze, her entire body stiffening. Then came the outburst, loud, sharp, panicked. She yelled that she wasn't going anywhere, that I couldn't touch her, that she was still a minor. I took a slow step forward, keeping my hands visible. My partner, Officer Reed, moved quietly behind me, ready in case she ran. Nicole started backing away, hands clenched into fists, muttering about people trying to control her. Her mother pleaded softly, her voice trembling, asking her to listen. Nicole shouted back, saying everyone always blamed her for everything. I tried to talk her down, using her name, steadying my tone, but the distance between logic and emotion was too wide. Suddenly, she turned, bolting toward the hallway. I moved fast, cutting her off before she reached her room. She tried to shove past me, and I grabbed her arm, keeping my hold firm but careful. She twisted hard, yelling for me to let go, threatening to break free. Her strength surprised me. Adrenaline does that to people, especially when they're scared. Reed stepped in, helping me guide her toward the wall. She kicked, screamed, cursed, every ounce of defiance crashing out of her. I told her she needed to stop resisting, that we weren't here to hurt her. She didn't hear a word. The sound of her mother crying filled the house. I could feel my own heartbeat hammering, but I didn't let it show. In moments like that, emotion is your enemy. Calm is your weapon. We managed to get one cuff on, then the other. Nicole froze, breathing hard, eyes blazing with fury and fear all at once. Then her voice dropped quieter, almost broken. She said she didn't remember what happened earlier, that sometimes she just blacked out. The fight in her faded, replaced by confusion. That's when I saw it, not a criminal, but a kid lost inside her own mind. Once the cuffs were on, the house went quiet except for Nicole's uneven breathing and the sound of her mother crying softly behind us. Jamie kept repeating that her daughter wasn't a bad person, that she just needed help. I nodded, but inside I was fighting that familiar ache that comes after adrenaline fades, the space where duty meets doubt. Nicole sat on the couch, still trembling, staring at her hands as if the cuffs did not belong to her. I crouched down to her level and asked if she understood why we were there. She didn't answer. Her eyes were glassy, empty, in a way I've seen before, that hollow look of someone trapped between guilt and illness. She said she didn't mean to scare anyone, that she just wanted people to stop talking about her. I radioed dispatch to confirm we had her in custody and requested juvenile intake paperwork. As I spoke, I could feel Nicole's gaze on me. There was defiance still, but underneath it, fear. I asked her if she had taken any medication that day. She said she forgot, that sometimes the pills made her too tired, so she skipped them. Her voice shook when she said she didn't want to hurt anybody, but people always said she did. Her mother whispered from the kitchen, saying Nicole had been off her meds for 2 weeks and hadn't been sleeping. That explained the erratic energy, the volatility. Still, the threats she made couldn't be ignored. When Reed guided Nicole outside, she resisted again, jerking away and yelling that we were ruining her life. The neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering. The air was thick with judgment, the kind that hangs over families long after the police leave. Reed stayed calm, speaking gently but firmly, telling her we were taking her to the station for a formal citation, not jail. She didn't believe him. Her voice cracked as she shouted that she was just a kid, that no one understood her. Jamie followed us out, begging her daughter to cooperate. Nicole turned and screamed that she didn't need anyone, that everyone had already given up on her. When we reached the patrol car, she froze. For a moment, she looked like she might bolt again, her muscles tense, her breathing sharp. I spoke quietly, telling her this didn't have to define her, that she still had a chance to make things right. She blinked, tears filling her eyes, and then she sat down without another word. Reed closed the door gently, and the sound of it echoed through the street like the final note of a long argument. As we drove off, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nicole stared out the window, her reflection pale against the glass. She whispered something I couldn't quite hear. Maybe a promise, maybe a threat, maybe both. I looked ahead, the road stretching out under fading sunlight, and I felt that same old question stirring inside me again. How many of these kids ever find their way back before it asks too late? We drove her to the station under the orange tint of the setting sun that hour, when everything looks softer than it feels. Nicole sat in the back seat, her reflection flickering in the window. Face pale, lips pressed tight. I could tell she wasn't angry anymore, just drained, lost somewhere between defiance and fear. She mumbled to herself, at first fragments of thoughts that made no sense. Then she looked up and said she didn't even remember what happened, that her head went blank when she got upset. Her voice trembled, with something that wasn't guilt, but confusion. Reed glanced at me, both of us thinking the same thing. This wasn't a bad kid. This was someone slipping through cracks too wide for rules to fill. At the precinct, she calmed down. The juvenile holding room was small, sterile, too bright. She sat across from me, tapping her fingers on the metal table. I asked her if she knew why she was here. She shrugged and said everyone always thought she was dangerous, but she wasn't. She said she just wanted people to stop talking about her. I asked if she had ever wanted to hurt anyone. She shook her head slowly, then whispered that sometimes her thoughts felt louder than her own voice, and she couldn't tell which ones were hers. That silence afterward felt heavier than the cuffs had been. Her mother arrived 20 minutes later, eyes red, holding a stack of old medical papers. She told me Nicole had been diagnosed years ago with bipolar disorder and severe anxiety. She said she'd begged the hospital to keep her longer last time, but they sent her home after 2 days. The system keeps turning, I thought, spinning people in and out, never long enough to fix what's broken. Nicole looked at her mother, her eyes softening for the first time that night. She whispered, "I didn't mean to scare anyone." Jamie reached out but stopped halfway, her hand trembling mid-air like she wasn't sure if her daughter would pull away. I sat there watching them, two people trying to reach each other across years of frustration, love, and fear. It hit me how thin that line is between crime and cry for help. Most people never see it, but when you've worn this badge long enough, you start to recognize that not everyone you arrest is bad. Some are just broken in ways the law can heal. That night stayed with me more than most. After the paperwork was done, I walked back into the quiet interview room where Nicole waited. The anger was gone. Her shoulders slumped forward, her gaze distant, as if the fluorescent lights above her were too bright to face. I sat across from her, not as a cop now, but as a man who'd seen too many young lives veer off track before they ever got the chance to begin. She didn't look up when she spoke. Her voice was soft, careful, the kind of tone people use when they afraid of breaking what little calm they have left. She said she knew people were scared of her, but she wasn't a monster. She said she just got tired of being the joke, of hearing whispers about her family, about her mom working 2 jobs and her not being normal. Every word came out cracked, heavy with exhaustion. I asked her if she remembered threatening the kids. She shook her head and said she only remembered yelling because they called her crazy. She said she blacked out sometimes, that when she did it was like her body moved faster than her thoughts. She looked at me, then eyes red, and asked if I believed she was evil. I told her no, evil is a choice, but pain isn't. She nodded slowly, as if she didn't quite believe me, but wanted to. Then she said something that caught me off guard, that she didn't want to hurt anyone, she just wanted someone to finally notice that she was hurting too. In that moment, the badge on my chest felt heavier than usual. There is no section in the law for the kind of wounds she carried, the invisible ones that live in silence. The system would process her, sign the forms, file her case, and then she would go back to the same house, the same block, the same fear. But for a brief moment, I saw the truth most people never see, that sometimes the person everyone fears is really just the one most afraid. When the formalities were finally over, Nicole asked if she could have a minute alone with her mother. I stood by the door, half in shadow, pretending to check paperwork, but really listening. Jamie sat beside her daughter, the two of them quiet for a long time. The kind of silence that carries more truth than words ever could. Then Nicole spoke, barely above a whisper. She said she was tired of being the problem, tired of feeling like her head was a storm that no one could calm. Her mother tried to speak, but her voice broke. Nicole reached for her hand, hesitant, as if asking permission to be loved again. For a second, the room didn't feel like a police station. It felt like a fragile attempt at healing two broken souls trying to remember how to trust each other. When they finished, I walked them to the exit. Nicole turned to me and asked if she would go to jail next time. I told her honestly that it depended on her choices, but also on the help she allowed others to give. She nodded, eyes shining with something between fear and understanding. Then she said quietly that she wanted to get better but didn't know how. I told her that was a start, that most people never even reach that point. Her mother thanked me, tears streaking her face, and led her outside. As they disappeared into the fading light, I felt the weight of what we do, how we walk into other people. Life has storms, trying to bring order, knowing sometimes the storm never really ends. That night, as I sat in my patrol car filling out the last of the reports, I couldn't shake the image of Nicole's eyes. There was something in them that reminded me of all the kids I'd seen fall through the cracks, not because they wanted to, but because no one caught them in time. I stared at the empty street ahead, the reflection of red and blue lights fading on the asphalt, and I realized that sometimes the hardest part of this job isn't what we see it as what we can and fix. A week later, my radio crackled with a familiar address, and for a second my chest tightened. The same neighborhood, the same block where everything had started. I half expected another argument, another terrified parent shouting over the line. But when I arrived, the street was still. The only sound was the wind brushing through the trees and a child's laugh echoing from a nearby porch. It was strange, the kind of calm that feels like a fragile ceasefire. I spotted Mrs. Cooper, the woman who had called us that night, standing by her mailbox. Her eyes were tired, but this time she smiled. She told me Nicole hadn't come back, that it had been peaceful. The kids played outside again, no one looking over their shoulder. Yet as she spoke, her voice wavered softer than before. She said she had seen Nicole once just a few days ago, walking past the corner at sunset. The girl had earbuds in her hood up, moving fast but not running. No shouting, no glares, just a quiet walk, like someone trying to leave behind the ghost of who they used to be. Mrs. Cooper said she wanted to call out to her, maybe offer a ride or a word of kindness, but the words got stuck in her throat. I told her I understood. Sometimes silence is the only mercy people know how to give. Back at the station, I called juvenile services to check her status. They told me she was complying with her treatment, taking her medication again, showing up for counseling. The report said she had been calmer, that she even smiled once during her last session. Small victories, but in this job, those are the ones that keep you going. They mentioned she started writing in a journal, saying it helped her remember what was real when her thoughts got loud. I stared at the case file for a long time after that. The pages were full of dates and signatures, nothing that could capture the sound of her trembling voice or the look in her mother's eyes. Files don't show that part. They don't record the human cost. That evening, I drove by the neighborhood again, the sky fading into a deep blue haze. Porch lights flickered on, and for once the street looked ordinary: families eating dinner, kids chasing a ball, music drifting from an open window. I slowed the patrol car at the corner where I first saw Nicole that day, her face flushed with anger and fear. Now there was only quiet, the kind that feels earned. I thought about her, about what it means to grow up carrying chaos inside you, and how easily the world calls it defiance instead of pain. Some kids fight the world because it is the only way they know to say they re-hurting. As I turned the cruiser around, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The uniform looked the same, but I didn't feel the same. This job has a way of carving lessons into you, one call at a time. I realized something simple that night: sometimes saving someone isn't about handcuffs or laws, but about listening long enough for them to hear their own voice again. I didn't know what would happen to Nicole, but I hoped the world would be a little kinder to her than it was before. The radio was quiet for once. I drove on the street, fading behind me, the weight of the night giving way to a fragile kind of peace. A few months passed before I heard Nicole's name again. It was late summer when a caseworker sent an update to our department. She had been transferred to a youth center outside the city, a structured program for mental health and rehabilitation. The report said she was doing better, taking part in art therapy and showing signs of progress. I read that line twice: signs of progress. In my world, those 3 words mean more than any medal or commendation ever could. I closed the email and sat back in my chair, letting the weight of quiet satisfaction settle in. For once, the story didn't end with loss. It ended with a chance. Still, part of me could not stop thinking about what might have happened if we hadn't gotten there in time. I've seen too many stories like hers turn tragic because no one stepped in early enough. Sometimes I think about how many Nicoles there are out there, kids trapped between broken homes, medical systems that give up too soon, and neighborhoods that only know how to fear them. I carry their names in the back of my mind like unfinished cases. We write reports, file them away, and move on. But those faces never really leave us. They stay quietly haunting the spaces between calls. One evening while on patrol, I passed by a small park near her old street. A group of children played tag near the swings, laughter cutting through the warm air. Among them was a new girl, older, calmer, sitting on a bench sketching in a notebook. For a moment I thought it might be her. The resemblance was faint, maybe just my imagination, but it made me slow the car. Whoever she was, she looked peaceful, and that was enough. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. Some stories are better left to continue without us. That night, as I parked the cruiser back at the station, I wrote my final note in Nicole's file: stabilized. Cooperative, showing improvement. 3 small words, but they carried everything: fear, struggle, hope, and the fragile possibility of change. Before I turned off the desk lamp, I added one more line under my breath, not for the record, but for myself. Sometimes saving someone means believing they can be saved. Driving home through the quiet streets, I rolled the window down and let the night air fill the car. The city lights shimmered on the pavement, and for a moment everything felt still. I thought of her mother, probably sleeping a little easier now, and of Nicole somewhere out there learning how to breathe again without the noise of the past chasing her. We don't always get endings like this, but when we do, they remind us why we keep answering the call. Because behind every report, behind every name, there is a life still trying to find its way back. And as long as I wear this badge, I'll keep believing that one act of understanding can still change the story. When I think back to that spring, it isn't at the shouting or the flashing lights that linger in my mind. It is the silence that came afterward, the kind that fills a room when the chaos finally dies but the pain remains. That silence has a weight to it, one that every cop learns to carry quietly. People think this job is about control, about catching the bad guys, but it is really about standing in the middle of broken moments and trying to keep them from collapsing completely. I've seen it more times than I can count. Anger masking fear, violence, hiding loneliness, defiance born from pain. Nicole was all of those things at once, and that's what made her unforgettable. In her eyes, I saw the kind of confusion that comes from growing up without enough light to guide you. She wasn't a villain. She was a kid fighting shadows no one else could see. And I realized that sometimes the uniform doesn't make us heroes. It just puts us close enough to witness the battle someone else is losing. That's the hardest part of this job, knowing that we can save everyone, but still showing up, still trying, because even a little bit of help can change the ending. Months later, when I drove past that same street, it looked ordinary again. Kids were laughing, neighbors talking, life returning to its rhythm. But I knew what it took to make it that way. I thought about Nicole. Maybe she was somewhere starting over, maybe still struggling but alive. And that was something. I've learned that peace is never permanent. It's something we protect moment by moment, call by call. This job teaches you that justice isn't always loud, and mercy isn't weakness. Real courage isn't in the chase. It's in the patience to listen, to see the human being beneath the chaos. When I hung my badge by the door that night, I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt grateful that for once I'd have been there in time. Because at the end of the day, that's all we can hope for, to arrive before the world gives up on someone. To remind them and ourselves that even in the darkest corners, there is still a reason to believe that people can change.